and welcome to the next edition of the Exponential DFS Podcast. My name is Michael, or That Guy Expo, and as you can see from the screen capture today, I am not joined by Corey or Legion of Boom today, as he is on vacation and working a lot, going up to vacation, and so he will not be joining me probably for another week or two. So I will be running these pods solo for the time being. But no problem, I'll go ahead and break down the slate for you guys today. I apologize for the inconsistent uploads. I'm going to try to be doing around 3 a week, even in his absence. It's just been, I haven't really been in the mood to play lately as often, and really trying to get the process back on track for myself before kind of uploading these podcasts. But back at it today, one of the last slates before the All-Star break, so hoping to have a good Friday slate going into the All-Star break, and then come back after the All-Star break and have a good strong second half of the season with more consistent uploads on the channel. So jumping right into the slate, so something new that I'm going to try to be doing when Corey is not joining me on the podcast. I'm going to be trying to go kind of game by game instead of position by position like I typically do when he is here. And also, as you can see, I'm going to try to have this screen capture of the DraftKings lineup builder right here with some of my other tabs open, so we can kind of go through some of the things I look at every day, which is a little easier to do without him being on the screen with me. I can kind of have this screen capture there. So kind of jumping right into the slate, kind of going to go game by game here. So the first game that we have here is the Cubs at the Pirates. So this game is right around a 7.5 over-under right now, which is to be expected. I mean, you have Arrieta and Liriano going. Arrieta has been, of course, one of the better pitchers in Major League Baseball this year. And Liriano, never really know what to expect from Liriano. I'm a little surprised the Cubs team total is not a little higher. I probably would have guessed around 4.5 for this game. They're sitting right around 4 right now. That could always move during the day as well. Pirates only have a 3-team total, and the Cubs have a 4 as of this morning. So kind of jumping into this, my thoughts on Arrieta. So it's an interesting decision today with Arrieta because you have a lot of pitchers that we're going to get into today, and you also have Coors Field. So whenever you have a lot of kind of ace pitchers that day and Coors Field, you really have to make your pick on which ace you're going to roster very closely. And Arrieta, I don't think, is going to be that guy for me today. The Pirates are not an awful offense, right? They're 12th in WOBA against right-hand pitching. They do have right around a 20.5% K rate versus righties, so that's not awful, and it's not good either, but it's really kind of middle of the road. Arrieta's K rate's right around 26.5, so that's pretty good for him on the year. He also did get 36.5 fantasy points his last start against Pittsburgh. Now, the issue I have with Arrieta today, obviously he's on the road in Pittsburgh, which I would say would be a downgrade for him compared to pitching in Wrigley. Just these last 3 starts do concern me. 6 fantasy points against the Mets, 7.9 against Cincinnati, 16.5 against St. Louis. St. Louis is always a tough team to pitch against, so I wouldn't really take that into consideration all that much. But on the road in Cincy, tough ballpark, but not a tough matchup, didn't pitch well. At the Mets, again, pretty good ballpark the Mets have for pitching, and 6 fantasy points at 13.6 just isn't going to cut it. Granted, he's getting a decrease today at 12.7, so I do like that. I mean, he's been relatively consistent, right? But my issue is he has upside for sure, but I don't think he has kind of the ceiling I want, especially because, again, I close this out, but his innings pitched, he hasn't been going deep in games, and that's kind of my concern rostering a guy for 12.7. Also, though, I don't want to target against him today, obviously, in cash specifically, but I don't think I'm going to pay 12.7 for Arrieta today, given those reasons. So, Liriano, I like the price tag. I mean, 6K is pretty intriguing. The issue I have, I don't want to target the Cubs. I mean, they're one of the top offenses in all of baseball, especially against left-handed pitching. And we can kind of see that here. I mean, they're 3rd in WOBA against left-handed pitching, 119 WRC plus, over a 200 ISO. So definitely not a team I want to target left-handed pitching against. So I will not be rostering Liriano really in any format, most likely tonight. So kind of jumping into hitters. So Contreras is definitely an interesting catching play tonight. I don't know if he's really worth the $3,900 price tag. Like I said, Liriano, I don't love him tonight to roster. I don't know how much I want to target him either. I mean, when a game is only a 7.5 over/under, I don't love taking that many hitters from a game with that low of a total when there's a lot of games on a slate, right? We have 15 games today, so definitely you don't have to go to these lower over/under games for hitters. So I like him. He's hit left-hand pitching extremely well. He has over 400 WOBA and over a 200 ISO this year, but I don't think I'm going to be rostering him at 3,900. Zobrist is pretty intriguing at second base for me tonight. But again, I don't think I'm really going to roster any hitters in this game, just given the fact of how low the total is. I think Zobrist very intriguing if he's leading off for the Cubs tonight, though. He's hit lefties really well this year at 378 WOBA. Again, though, Liriano, you never really know what to expect with him. Chris Bryant, I think, makes an absolute fantastic GPP play tonight, whether you play him in the outfield or third base. I think he's going to go kind of overlooked. People will see the name Liriano and not want to roster Bryant, but he's smashed lefties this year. 416 WOBA, 258 ISO in Pittsburgh. I mean, definitely like him for GPP tonight. And then there's really no outfielders I like. I mean, you could play Bryant or Contreras in the outfield. I don't want any of these Pittsburgh guys, and that's really all I'm looking at for the Cubs are those three guys, Contreras, Zobrist, and Bryant. So kind of moving on to the Angels and Baltimore game. So I was somewhat surprised. This total is 9.5, which isn't, I guess, overly surprising, but the surprising part for me, I didn't expect Baltimore to have a team total around 5. Shoemaker's numbers this year, I mean, granted, he hasn't been this good of a pitcher in the past, and this year he's really pitching very well. I really didn't expect to see right around a 5-team total for Baltimore. I probably would have guessed 4, maybe 4.5, probably closer to 4.5 given their offense. The 5 kind of surprises me, and I'm really not in love with many Baltimore bats tonight. I like Shoemaker quite a bit, and the 5-team total for Baltimore kind of scares me off of him. Maybe for cash, I still have to look at it more closely, but definitely the 5-team total for a team in a 9.5 over/under game. Never really like rostering pitchers in that high of a total game, and it's in Baltimore. I would definitely like Shoemaker a lot more if they were in LA. So I'm not going to roster him in cash, most likely, obviously, because he's a much better pitcher at home than he is on the road. Baltimore is a huge shift for hitters compared to playing in LA in the Angels Stadium, and I'm not going to roster him in cash. I think a GPP for sure is intriguing, just given his 6,700 price tag. I mean, he had the bad start at Boston, which is that's not an easy matchup whatsoever. But I mean, if you're looking for a 3x, 4x ceiling from him, I mean, yeah, he's going to give up some runs most likely against Baltimore, but he Ks a bunch of guys, and his K rate is very impressive this year. And Baltimore, I mean, they do have a 22.5% K rate against righties as well, so it's not like they don't strike out. So definitely intriguing for me in a GPP. Ubaldo, of course, you don't want to roster Ubaldo against the Angels. You want to target against him. So no catchers I'm really in love with. Wieters, I could see the merit, but I'm not in love with him at all. First base, the only guy I really am liking is more in a GPP format is CJ Cron. He's been absolutely smashing the ball coming off of that great series in Fenway against Boston. Definitely like him quite a bit against Ubaldo tonight. Again, the Camden Yards kind of favors left-handed hitters over right-handed hitters, so that is something to consider. But I do like Cron, and Ubaldo has been a little tougher on righties. I mean, a 350 WOBA to right-handed hitters is not tough on them at all, but he's given up a 423 WOBA to lefties. So you really want to target lefties against him tonight on the Angels side, which, again, there's not a ton of lefties in the Angels lineup you really are in love with. That's kind of the issue with playing Angels tonight at all. So no one at second I really like. Yunel Escobar is intriguing to me at third. I don't think he's a $4,500 player whatsoever, just given the fact that he's leading off in Camden Yards for the Angels with a 4.5 team total against Ubaldo is intriguing, but he's not a $4,500 player. Manny Machado, like I said, I'm not in love with a lot of the Baltimore bats tonight, in all honesty. And if I'm not in love with a lot of the Baltimore bats, and I kind of like Shoemaker a little bit, not going to pay $5K for Machado. if you have the cash, I would say he'd probably be a pretty solid play, but I would prefer him at shortstop. Outfield is really where I think this game is intriguing because Trout at 5,600, it's one of those questions, is he worth that tonight? Because like we said, Ubaldo's a little tougher on right-handed hitters. The ballpark favors left-handed hitters a little bit more than right-handed hitters. So I really do like Cole Calhoun quite a bit. I think he has a pretty solid price at 4,500. Relatively consistent, doesn't really give you a zero very often. He hits very high in this order for sure. Definitely like Cole Calhoun a lot tonight going against Ubaldo in Camden Yards. So that's basically what I like in this game. So moving on to, let me find my notes on this game. I apologize. Should have had this in better order. Okay, so this game, Detroit and Toronto. So you have J.A. Happ and Mike Pelfrey. Now, Pelfrey, of course, is a guy that is going to get hit hard tonight. I mean, the Blue Jays team total is just ridiculous tonight. It's definitely up there for sure. It's last I saw it was approaching 6.5. So definitely a very high team total tonight for Toronto. I definitely prefer Toronto than the Bats and Coors tonight. The Bats and Coors tonight, we'll get to that game later on. There's a lot of games to get through. Pretty decent pitchers going in Coors tonight. So I think Toronto is kind of going to be where a lot of people go in cash tonight against Pelfrey. J.A. Happ, not rostering him as a pitcher. I don't feel like targeting him a ton, really at all, just because Detroit, I don't want to target Happ against Detroit, but there's not a lot of the bats on Detroit that are at a price tag that I really like. Russell Martin is intriguing to me tonight at catcher, just given he's pretty cheap, given the price tag of the other Toronto players. I like his 3,800 price tag, gives you exposure to Toronto. He's projected to hit 5th for them, so definitely do like Russell Martin quite a bit in this game in Toronto against Mike Pelfrey. James McCann hitting 7th. That's a slight lineup bump from where he was projected to hit at 8th, but not really any interest there with him hitting so low in the order. Edwin might be the chalk tonight at first base. I think there's two main guys I'm looking at right now at first, and Edwin is definitely, there's a couple. Edwin's one of them. Was given the fact, again, against Pelfrey in Toronto, Edwin absolutely smashes both-handedness of pitcher, but he has a 362 WOBA and a 243 ISO against right-handed pitching. Mike Pelfrey gets hit hard by both-handedness as well, 387 WOBA to lefties, 368 WOBA to righties, but he does give up more home runs to right-handed hitters as he's giving up 1.42 home runs per 9 to right-handed hitters. So definitely like Edwin tonight. Miggy's price is somewhat intriguing at 44, but I don't think that's deflated enough for me to roster him, and he has struggled more against left-handed pitching this year than previously. I'm not really sure why that is, but he has struggled more against lefties than in the past, and he's hit righties much better this year. Victor Martinez, I don't feel like paying 47 for him. I'll just go up to 54 for Edwin. There's no one at second base in this game I'm really in love with, unless Devin Travis hits higher in the order. But he's really typically not hitting that high in the order unless it's against a lefty. Josh Donaldson, very expensive tonight at 5,600. Does give you that 2 home run upside. I mean, he just gave you that the other day against Kansas City. I mean, he doesn't have to hit home runs to get you upside, but definitely a 30-point upside type player tonight against Pelfrey. Really do like him. The question will be, can you fit him and Edwin into the same lineup? It's going to be a little bit tough with the number of aces going tonight that you probably want to get in your lineup as well. Shortstop, Tulowitzki is intriguing at 48. A little inflated in price for me, hitting most likely 6th. I don't really want to pay close to $5K for a guy hitting 6th. I understand it's Pelfrey. I wish he was slightly cheaper. If he was more at the 42 range like he just was last game, I'd be more interested. I think 48 is a bit expensive for him. Correa is pretty intriguing to me at 4K. Again, whenever you have basically the highest team total in the slate and you can get the leadoff hitter for that team at a relatively nice price, he's gonna have runs scored if he gets on base. I think he has decent stolen base upside tonight against Pelfrey for sure. He has a little bit of pop, so I definitely do like Correa tonight. He's not one of those guys that's going to get you a ton of upside, I don't think, at 4K, so that's kind of the downside to rostering him. So kind of have to see how your roster construction is. I think he's a solid play. I don't think he's a must-have tonight, though. Michael Saunders, 4,700. He's a little bit cheaper than guys like Edwin and Donaldson. Like I said, Pelfrey gives up more home runs to righties than lefties, but Saunders has a ton of power. He's hitting cleanup for this team, and he's under 5K, and they're by far the highest team total. So definitely do like Saunders a lot. I think a very interesting cash game and GPP play tonight would be Justin Upton. Hitting 6, so not the greatest lineup spot, but that's typically where he hits in this lineup. He does hit lefties fine. He's much worse against right-handed pitching this year. He has home run upside against the lefty. He does have a 310 WOBA and a 186 ISO. Those are not overly impressive, but you would expect him to hit lefties relatively well. Hap is not an easy matchup for him, but given he's almost minimum salary, he's 2,300. He's in a great hitting environment. I really do like him quite a bit tonight in cash games specifically, but GPPs as well, because if you're trying to fit in a guy that has 1 to 2 home run upside, I think Justin Upton at 2,300 definitely could hit you a home run against a left-handed pitcher in Toronto. So definitely like Justin Upton a lot tonight at that price tag. All right. Moving on to Cincinnati against Miami. So this game is only a 7 over-under, and this is kind of where you might want to roster a pitcher. So in Miami, not in Cincinnati, of course. So Jose Fernandez becomes extremely interesting. Cincinnati is the lowest team total in the entire slate at 2.5. Jose Fernandez has a ton of K upside. Cincinnati, they only have a 297 WOBA against right-handed pitching, 79 WRC plus. They have a 22% K rate, and Jose is a ridiculous 37% K rate. So he is coming off of a pretty rough start against Atlanta, but this guy has 40 to 50 point upside tonight easily, and I think he's probably the chalk play today at pitcher. 13-4. He's coming in cheaper than he's 700 more than Arrieta. So Arrieta at 12.7 is cheaper, but I think Jose Fernandez has a ton more upside than Arrieta does for sure today, and I think he's going to be relatively chalky against Cincinnati given the team total and given the upside he does possess. Dan Straley, not that awful of a pitcher. You look at his numbers, right, with his WOBA numbers. He's definitely out-pitching his xFIP against left-handed hitters. He only has a 296 WOBA given up to lefties, but he has a 611 xFIP. So that's kind of a situation where, especially in a GPP, you could maybe take advantage of the masses kind of looking at that WOBA and saying, well, he's a pretty good pitcher against lefties. Well, not really. He's probably getting lucky with that xFIP number. So I do like guys like Derek Dietrich, but hitting 6th, not as intriguing as when he was projected to lead off for me. So kind of taking a look, that Miami lineup has posted, obviously. Let me take a look at who is hitting leadoff for Miami. So JT Realmuto at catcher leading off tonight. That gives you another catching option at 4K against Straley. Straley's been much tougher on right-handed hitters at a 375 xFIP, so he's closer to his xFIP and WOBAs against righties. So it's interesting that they're not having Dietrich lead off. I did like Dietrich a lot when he was projected to lead off there. I think that the only other guy I really have a ton of interest in would be Ozuna. Is pretty cheap tonight at 4K. He's kind of been at that price tag recently. He's kind of been up and down. I think Straley's a decent pitcher against righties, but Ozuna has so much upside in the home run ball. I get it's in Miami, not a great hitter's park, right? But I think especially in a GPP at 4K, that's relatively fair. Adam Duvall is really underpriced at 3,400 as well, but I don't want to target really any Cincinnati bats. If you wanted to load up on a few Cincy bats in a GPP lineup, I would probably load up on Duvall, Votto at only 3,500, Brandon Phillips only 2,200. Guys like that most likely. Cozart's not that cheap at 32, but I would definitely lean guys probably like Jay Bruce at 31, Duvall at 34, and Votto at 35. Those are pretty fair prices for guys like that. New York at Cleveland now. So this is an 8 over-under. Kluber's price is very cheap tonight. That does make him pretty intriguing to me, especially in cash. The issue I have with Kluber is the Yankees don't strike out a ton. Granted, they are in Cleveland and not in New York, which is definitely favorable for Kluber. The Yankees just they don't hit that well. They haven't this year. And 308 WOBA versus right-handed pitchers. The issue is they only have an 18.5% K rate against righties, and he is too cheap for his upside tonight, I would say. Coming off that one tough start against Toronto, he dropped from 13.6 all the way to 11K. This is not an 11K pitcher. Kluber is definitely not an 11K pitcher. He has Ks built in himself. His K rate is a little low at 24.9, given the caliber of pitcher he is, and he has gotten hit some this year. But he definitely possesses 30 to 40 point upside, and I think he has a pretty nice floor tonight against the Yankees. So definitely intriguing to me. I definitely don't want to target any Yankees against him. Not sure if I'll roster him in cash yet. It'd be pretty tough to fit him and Jose Fernandez in. It's definitely doable. Chad Green he's given up a 486 WOBA to left-handed hitters. This game is an 8 over-under. Cleveland has a 4.5. Yankees having a 3.5 team total is a little intriguing, given Kluber. I think I would have guessed a 3. But 3.5 is not overly surprising. If it was any higher than that, that would be very concerning. But Green at a 486 WOBA to lefties. He's pretty tough on right-handed hitters. So I really only want to target lefties against Chad Green, which is fine because Cleveland has a lot of left-handed bats that are intriguing. I think starting right away, Carlos Santana leading off, most likely against Green at 4,900. Intriguing at first base for sure. Gives you power upside in the leadoff spot. Should get quite a few at-bats tonight. Jason Kipnis at 4,900. You could make a very nice Cleveland stack tonight with Santana, Kipnis, and Lindor. Those main three as your kind of framework for that stack. Kipnis, great spot. Going to hit second most likely. 4,900, pretty fair. And then, of course, Lindor is kind of the cheapest out of all three of them at shortstop at 4,600. Like all three of them tonight. Those are kind of the only three guys in this game I'm interested in, besides maybe Kluber. Tampa Bay, Boston. So this is an interesting game for me. Big Red Sox fan, so it's hard for me to ever roster guys against the Red Sox. So 10 over under tonight. Both teams have a 5-team total. Chris Archer's price is continuing to go down every single start, and it's almost getting to the point that he is very intriguing every time he pitches in cash. Just given the Ks he has built in, he could easily turn in a 30-point start. The issue I have with Archer is he, to me, is almost a roster-only at-home pitcher. His home road splits are pretty significant. I never really have a ton of interest for him on the road. He just pitched against Boston at home, had a decent outing, 4 earned, but he struck out 9 against a team that doesn't strike out a lot. The issue I have with Archer, he always throws a ton of pitches in the first couple innings, so he never really goes that deep in games. The Red Sox are willing to take a lot of pitches and walk early in the game, which is an issue that Archer has. He's going to pitch in Fenway, which is a great hitter's park today. I don't really have a ton of interest. I could see quite a few people going to him in cash, and it's something I'm still going to look at because of his price. His price is just too low. He's coming off of being 8,300 against Detroit, dropping all the way to 68. So his price kind of went up. Then it's all the way down to 68. People are really pricing. DraftKings is really pricing pitchers down against the Red Sox significantly. I took advantage of this a couple weeks ago when Sale is really lowly priced. So I'm intrigued. But the Red Sox lineup is better. Hanley is starting to hit more. He's getting hot for sure. Brock Holt is back in the lineup for them. Travis Shaw is starting to hit a little bit. This lineup is pretty scary, especially at home. And Archer's not a guy that pitches very well on the road in general. So I have some interest. I just don't know if it's something I'm going to pull the trigger on. But he definitely gives you exposure to some Toronto bats and higher price bats if you roster him. And Hernandez, and that gives you a great ceiling for sure. So OSullivan, not a good pitcher, a spot pitcher right now for the Red Sox. They need to go out and get another starter. He's pitched fine. He doesn't strike anyone out. He pitches to contact. He has a 405 WOBA to righties, 339 WOBA to lefties, 646 xFIP to righties. So he's out pitching his xFIP, and he still is over 400 WOBA to righties. So the Tampa Bay bats have been priced up, and that does cause some issues for trying to fit them in. I think Hanley is. I know I just went on about Archer. He's, I think, a decent play today. But I think it's also okay if you were to play Red Sox. In cash, I think it's a little riskier. Even though they have a 5-team total, I think there's teams in much better spots. But I think a GPP stack for Boston would be pretty underowned today, and I would be fine with it. I think Hanley makes a nice play at 4,300. I do like Forsythe quite a bit at second base. Second base is typically not a position I'm always in love with. He's 42, so it's a pretty expensive price, but I think 42 for him leading off. He's the away team in Boston against OSullivan. Could easily put a home run over the Green Monster today. I do like Forsythe quite a bit. Another guy that could put a home run over the Monster easily is Longoria. 4,100, fairly priced again. I think Forsythe and Longo are kind of your guys that are going to be the more reliable in this lineup at those prices. But I definitely probably prefer the cheaper outfield options the Rays have, depending on where they're hitting. Guys like Souza, Dickerson are in play for me today. They're both 3,800. It all depends on where they're hitting in the lineup, and their lineup just came out. So let's see where they are hitting, because I definitely have interest in Souza and Dickerson. Dickerson's hitting 7, Souza's hitting 6, so kind of where they're projected to hit before the game. So Souza I have more interest in than Dickerson hitting 7. Souza definitely hitting 6 is intriguing. Xander is still pretty cheap at 41. Definitely like Xander quite a bit, very consistent. I don't know if this is the spot I want to play him in cash, righty on righty against Archer. Not a ton of interest. I think Brad Miller is pretty expensive at that price tag at 45. Not a ton of home run upside, I would say, with Brad Miller. So I think where you want to go with your Rays would be maybe Souza, Longoria, Forsythe. Geyer's in play at 3.6K, hitting 5th. Not as much in love with Geyer. He struggles against righties. So I think Souza, Longo, and Forsythe are kind of the Rays that I would pay attention to. And Red Sox, I'm not in love with playing any of them in cash, especially if people are going to be on Archer. It's kind of one of those things you could take advantage in GPP if you think a lot of people are going to be on Archer. But Archer, I think, is intriguing for cash. It's just tough for me to ever roster him on the road, especially against a team like the Red Sox. Washington going up against the Mets. Now, this is definitely a very low total game today. Strasburg, the issue I have with Strasburg at 12.9, he never truly hits his 39-point ceiling. He doesn't go extremely deep into games, so I'm writing off Strasburg today on the road. I'm not in love with him today at that price. I mean, yes, he has a great floor. The Mets are not going to hit him. I don't think they're going to. But them having a 3.5 team total kind of stands out to me slightly when you're paying 12.9 for a guy that you really need to get K upside, and they're at 22.4% K rate against righties, so the K upside is there. I can't roster him if he's not going to go deep into games. I mean, 7 innings is fine, but even the games that he's been going deep, he's been giving up earned runs, so he's not been lights out. He is 11-0 with a 2.71 ERA, so obviously he's pitched extremely well this year. He's gotten a lot of run support, but from a DFS perspective lately, the fantasy points per game are not at a point that I really want to roster him at 12.9. Syndergaard is very intriguing at 10.8. He's one of those guys that at 10.8, he could give you 33 to 35 point or higher ceiling easily. I mean, we saw it against Pittsburgh not too many starts ago. The issue I have with Syndergaard lately is he's been very inconsistent, and that's not what you want for cash. The Cubs, he pitched very well. That's a tough matchup, pitched very well. Washington, tough matchup again, but pitched really, really bad. Kansas City, didn't pitch well. Pittsburgh, didn't pitch well. He is at home, right? But his home road splits aren't extremely significant. They are they are 3 fantasy points per game. The ERA is much better at home. The WHIP is better at home. So definitely, I would prefer to roster him at home. He's someone I'm definitely going to seriously look at for cash today. Mainly so far, I'm looking at guys like Archer, Syndergaard, and of course Jose Fernandez. Those would be my main 3 so far that we've covered that I would consider for cash. The question would be someone like Archer all the way down to like 6,800. Is Syndergaard worth 4K more than him in the fantasy points per game perspective? Not sure about that. Archer's tough to roster on the road, like I mentioned, but I think that price tag is just really, really intriguing. I don't like any hitters in this game. I'm not rostering any of them. Minnesota, Texas, Hamels against Gibson. Fade Hamels at all costs in Texas today against a team that can hit lefties pretty well. I don't have any interest in Cole Hamels. Kyle Gibson giving up a 356 WOBA to lefties, 297 WOBA to righties. His xFIPs are basically the same at 4.55, 4.60 against lefties and righties. So definitely outpitching his xFIP against righties, but much tougher on righties than he is lefties. I think Kenyus Vargas makes an interesting GPP play today. Hasn't played a lot of games this year, but last year he did hit left-handed pitching pretty well. In a great ballpark in Texas. His price is 38, so it has risen slightly, but definitely in love with him in a GPP format. He's going to be sub 10%, maybe even around 5%, I would think, in this ballpark. His price is not extremely low, so it's kind of that middle of the tier, middle of the road kind of price. Definitely like him a lot today. Texas has around a 5.5 team total, so you definitely want to try to get some exposure to them. The tough part is how, because like we said, Gibson, a little tougher on righties, not as good against lefties. I think Beltre is intriguing for sure. At 37 and gives you kind of some cheap exposure to the Rangers today. I think the outfield is where the exposure is kind of going to come for Texas. And I think it all depends where Mazzara hits in the lineup today, because Mazzara at 3,600 is really, really, really cheap against Gibson. But if he's hitting 7th like projected, I don't have any interest in him. But if he somehow slides into that top 5, hitting 3rd somehow in the order today, definitely think he's going to be very chalky. And a very, very nice play at 36. Desmond, I think, is your top play on Texas, but 5K is going to be kind of tough. Chu makes a great play leading off against the lefty and righty platoon splits against Gibson at 48. Sano is underpriced at 39. I think he makes a nice GPP play against Cole Hamels, and those are my main interests right there, those 4 guys, Chu, Mazzara, Desmond, and Sano. And Mazzara, it all depends on where he's hitting in the lineup. And I can check to see if their lineup has come out, but I don't believe it has yet. So that's kind of going to be where I'm looking in that game. Atlanta against the White Sox. So looking here at pitching, so you have Chris Sale, another ace on the mound today. The issue I have with him at 13.5 is he pitches more to contact this year than he has in the past. The Braves are a team that doesn't strike out a ton. They do strike out a decent amount versus lefties, a 21% K rate. But not a 13.5 guy for me today when we talked about Jose Fernandez, roughly the same price. Definitely not on the Chris Sale bandwagon today. Whistler, 334 WOBA to lefties, 272 WOBA to righties, so much, much tougher on righties. The only interest you really should have in the White Sox would be kind of on the left-handed side. Now, I say that, but Jose Abreu's price to me is just really, really, really deflated. He's been around this price tag recently for a while, and it kind of dropped after in Houston. It kind of dropped around to 34, and it's been around that the whole time. He's just really cheap. He's not a $3,300 hitter. He's back in Chicago where home runs are a lot easier to hit. He was home against New York, didn't really do anything. He had 8 total fantasy points over 3 games. He's kind of in a slide here, but I think 33 is really, really a nice price for him, especially in like a cash game where if you're wanting to pay up for 2 higher priced guys and you can't get up to someone like Edwin, I think he makes a pretty solid play. Excuse me. I think Brett Lowry is intriguing for sure. He's hitting 6th today for them. Very relatively consistent guy, has some pop, so I think at 35 is intriguing. Frazier has a ton of upside, hitting 5th for them today. 38. So these are kind of all right-handed bats I've mentioned already, and like we said, Whistler, kind of a guy you don't want to target righties against most of the time, but when a team has a 5-team total, you kind of have to find their better hitters in their lineup, and I think Frazier has a pretty deflated price at 38 with 23 homers on the year. Not a fantastic cash play, I would say, but I think in a GPP, 3,800 for maybe a home run is pretty nice. I think the best play on the White Sox would probably be Adam Eaton at 3,700, hitting second. Again, the main guy on that team besides Melky that has platoon split. He's going to be having a lefty on righty against Whistler. Melky is fine, but I typically lean Eaton, especially when they're this close in price. When Eaton was like 1,000 more than Melky, I would take Melky, but with Eaton only 300 more, I think he makes a pretty solid play today for them. I think Tim Anderson is a little expensive for me, but again, a solid shortstop play. Oakland and Houston, not a lot to love in this game for me in terms of hitters. I think McHugh is intriguing at 7,100. But if you told me I could have Archer at 68 or McHugh at 75, I would take Archer. I think McHugh, he struggled against Oakland last time out. He only had 9.2 fantasy points. I don't love targeting Oakland. I understand that they're a team that has a low WOBA against righties, but they don't strike out a lot. And McHugh, his K percentage really isn't all that impressive. So I'm not in love with him today, especially in Houston. If they were in Oakland, I'd have more interest in McHugh. Megden, he GPP maybe has some upside given he's facing Houston. He's had decent K numbers this year in his starts, 5.5, 9, 7.5, so relatively consistent around 5 to 6. But not going to play him at that price. I think Correa is really cheap today at 39. Definitely have some interest there, given his home run pop at 3,900. And I think Rasmus is intriguing at 36. The main guy, again, Houston, you want to target lefties against Megden, but the issue is Houston doesn't have really many lefty bats you love. And I think Rasmus is that main guy for them that I could fall in love with home run upside. Cash games, maybe just given his price tag and gives you another home run upside player in your lineup. That's the main guy that I like. I think Marwin is typically too expensive for my taste, but he is 3.2 today, so he's in play, I think, at third base, or 3.3, I'm sorry. 3.3. So he's in play at third base, but don't want to play him at first. Third, there's typically a lot of better options there. Moving on to Philadelphia, Colorado. So the Coors Field game. So I think this is the most interesting game of the day, given the fact of what do you do with it. Because I don't like targeting John Gray when he pitches in Coors. And I think John Gray honestly makes a decent GPP play today. And this is why. I think even though he's in Coors, he pitches relatively well there, has a very high K percentage. The Phillies are not a great offense. Even though they're in Coors today, they are not a great offense. We're forgetting that they are not good. So I think John Gray makes a decent GPP play today. Look at his starts. He's actually pitched better in Coors than he has on the road, which is very surprising, but he has. And I think John Gray at 69, again, would I take Archer at 68? Absolutely. That's, I think, where a lot of people are going to go today, especially in GPPs. And cash, too, I think, because of just where his price has deflated to. But I think John Gray makes a decent GPP, especially if you think that people are going to be on Archer at 68. He's basically the same price pivot over to Gray. And if Archer gets lit up, then you're in a great spot if Gray pitches decent. Vince Velasquez, 72. Both pitchers are pretty solid this year. Vince Velasquez, only a 299 WOBA to lefties, 300 WOBA to righties, and his xFIP numbers look very impressive as well. 376 xFIP to lefties, 343 xFIP to righties. So, not a guy that his WOBA is out pitching his xFIP. Very similar numbers. not a game I'm really in love with. I don't really know if I'm going to have any exposure to this game, just given the price tag of these guys. If there are any Colorado players that make the lineup that are very, very cheap, guys like Adames, then I think they're going to be must-plays, given its course. But I think right now, as the projected lineup stands, there's not a lot to love in a points per dollar thing. I much prefer Toronto if I'm going to pay up over $5K for a guy today. Cameron Rupp, intriguing at 39, a lot of home run upside. Again, though, I'm not in love with the Philly bats whatsoever tonight. Tommy Joseph, another Philly bat. If you do like Philly, I think Joseph and Rupp are kind of the higher plays. I think Abdul Herrera is a nice play, but he doesn't get any discount. I get he's in cores, but 51 for him is very expensive against John Gray. Nolan Arenado is basically always in play when he's in cores, but he has a righty-on-righty, and Blackman and Cargo are really expensive. Again, I think there's better points per dollar in the Toronto game, honestly, tonight. St. Louis and Milwaukee. I don't have interest in Michael Wacha or Jimmy Nelson. I think Wacha is fine. I think there's better plays cheaper than him. I think even Colin McHugh might be a better play than Wacha. I think for upside, Colin McHugh is maybe better. Wacha, I think, safer. But Wacha never really carries a ton of upside to him. Jimmy Nelson, 337 WOBA to lefties, 318 WOBA to righties. Definitely prefer to target lefties with that 550 xFIP to lefties. I think for that reason, I think Matt Adams is a decent play at 3,500. He isn't really consistent. For cash, I wouldn't roster him. A GPP flyer play, I'm fine with him. I think Scooter Gennett is interesting if he does hit second for Milwaukee, even though he's facing Wacha. 3,500 is a pretty nice price tag for him. They're in Milwaukee, not in St. Louis. So definitely like Scooter if he's hitting second. That's a very cheap price tag. If Colton Wong leads off for St. Louis, which is projected, I think he's going to be pretty chalky at second base. You can play him in the outfield, but I think he's more solid at second base for 3,200. I think that's just really too cheap. Seattle, Kansas City. Not a game I'm in love with. It's only an 8.5 over/under. I think Ventura makes a pretty nice GPP play, though, at 4,900. He has a ton of K upside. I think in cash, it's no, don't roster him in cash. But I think in a GPP, I mean, he could give you 5, 6x. You saw it here in Chicago. Gave you 6x at a 4,900 salary. Detroit gave you a 5x. And then pitched pretty poorly his last two starts. Poorly before those two good starts. So he's kind of a guy that's up and down. But I really do like him a lot in a GPP format because of his price tag. The matchup is tough against the Mariners. I understand that. And he's giving up a pretty bad WOBA to lefties. And Seattle doesn't strike out a ton against righties. But I think a nice GPP play. Iwakuma, you definitely want to target lefties against him. He's giving up a 374 WOBA to lefties. Even though you want to target lefties against Iwakuma, I think Sal Perez is a decent play at catcher tonight at 3K. I mean, this is a guy that pretty good player, all-star player, and Iwakuma is not a shutdown pitcher. And 3K, bad ballpark, but that's really a nice price tag. Robinson Cano. If you're not loving Ventura, which I don't think you need to love Ventura at all, in cash, I think Cano makes a decent play, but I think there's better points per dollar, like we talked about with Colton Wong and Scooter Gennett. And I think that in the outfield, you have two guys I like. I like Leonis Martin against Ventura leading off, and I also do like Alex Gordon at 3K leading off against Iwakuma. He gets that lefty on righty matchup. Hasn't been all that great this year since he's come back from injury, but I think he's still relatively cheap, given he's getting a lefty on righty against Iwakuma leading off. And I do like Leonis Martin leading off as well. San Diego and the Dodgers. I do not roster Scott Kazmir. Do not. San Diego is much better against lefties. Cashner, I don't really want to target Kazmir all that often, most likely. There's a couple guys I do like. Cashner, 383 WOBA to righties, only 311 to lefties, so he kind of has reverse splits this year. But there's not a lot of LA bats I'm in love with at all. I think on the San Diego side, Derek Norris is solid at 36, but I think there's guys cheaper than him like Sal Perez that I might prefer since Kazmir is a better pitcher. Solarte, a decent second base play. He's hit lefties extremely well this year. 455 WOBA, 256 ISO. Very cheap at 3,600. He hits cleanout for this team. I do really, really like Solarte tonight. Matt Kemp is too cheap at 3,600 in the outfield. A guy that hits lefties pretty well. He's starting to hit the ball better. Has home run upside. 3,600 is a very nice price tag for him. So those are the three guys I would look at for San Diego. Would be Derek Norris, Solarte, and Kemp. On the Dodgers side, again, not really much to love. Adrian Gonzalez, no. Chase Utley, no thanks. Justin Turner, a little expensive for my liking. Corey Seager's pretty expensive. In the outfield, Trace Thompson, maybe. But again, Cashner, he does have reverse splits. I guess Trace Thompson is intriguing. But that's really kind of where it ends for me. Arizona at the Giants. Not much on this game. Very low total. Samardzija doesn't strike enough guys out for me to have an interest in him against Arizona. It's in San Francisco, not in Arizona, so it makes hitters less intriguing. I think the most intriguing play in this game would be if Grant Green is going to hit second for San Francisco at 2,500. I think he could be one of the chalkier second base plays outside of guys like Colton Wong if he leads off. So I think second base is pretty intriguing today, depending on, you really have to look at the lineups and where guys are going to hit. I think Grant Green is very intriguing hitting second against Patrick Corbin against the righty on lefty matchup. And Posey's always in play against the lefty no matter where he's playing. I think Posey. But again, I think there's better point per dollar plays than Buster Posey's. So kind of looking at an entire slate overview tonight. So big slate. I think the main guys you want to look at for cash games would be Jose Fernandez, Chris Archer, if you trust him on the road against Boston. I think Kluber is intriguing. Noah Syndergaard is underpriced. I think you could even make a case for guys like Colin McHugh if you really wanted to. Shoemaker to me is a nice play. I don't know if cash. I think I'd rather roster Archer than Shoemaker. But there's a lot of ways you can go today. I don't think Coors is a must today. I think you probably definitely want to fit in some Toronto bats. They're kind of the Coors field of today. So I could definitely see rostering a Jose Fernandez and a Chris Archer and just hoping Archer gets you 17 to 20 points. And then having Jose go off and have your bats go off. But you could also make a case for going guys like Jose Fernandez and Syndergaard and going with a ton of upside and more safety than a guy like Archer. So definitely a lot of ways you can go today. So thank you very much for joining me today on the solo pod. I hope to be back. I don't believe there is a Monday slate. I believe it's the All-Star break. So if there is not, I will be back after the All-Star break. So thank you for tuning in. Like and subscribe to the video if you enjoyed. And I will be getting a new webcam and a new microphone for the next podcast. So the quality of the podcast will improve significantly. So thank you for sticking with us, and I hope you've enjoyed. This has been Michael, or That Guy Expo.